Welcome to the channel. Another bedtime story. About her. She was tall. Thin. Wrong. As if her arms were too long. And she stood there, staring right through the window. No face. No eyes. Who is she? Listen to the story about this. On the edge of the forest, not far from the tiny village of Jemseg in the province of New Brunswick, lived an elderly couple, Thomas and Mary Semi. They lived in seclusion. Their old two-story house stood a couple of kilometers away from Jemseg, a tiny settlement deep in the backwoods of New Brunswick. Around them, there was only forest. A dark, damp mass of spruce and maple trees stretching beyond the horizon. The house had been built by Thomas's grandfather, and according to local lore, it stood on the site of an old Mi'kmaq trail once used by shamans. The forest there was different. Not just trees, but a living wall. It was never truly quiet. Always some noise. The rustle of leaves, the crackling sound as if someone was walking, and winds that blew with their own strange logic, independent of the weather. They had lived there for more than 40 years. Imagine that. So many years in peace. Nothing strange until one unusual night. It all began in autumn. Thomas often said something had changed in the forest. Little by little, everything seemed different. For example, the birds went silent. And the fox, who used to come into their backyard, disappeared. But the real horror came later, one night. Thomas and Mary were not afraid. They had spent almost 40 years in that house. They knew every creak in the boards, every bird by the window. But everything changed in the fall of 2022. At first, small things. Sounds like footsteps behind the house. A couple of missing objects, a bowl, some laundry from the yard. Then came the voices. At first, Mary thought it was just the wind. But one night she woke up to a clearly spoken Mary. She sat up in bed. Thomas was asleep. Outside, it was dark. No moon, no stars. Only the trees swaying in the wind. "Did you hear that?" she asked her husband in the morning. "Hear what?" Thomas replied. "Someone was calling me. Like my voice, but not me. Do you understand?" Thomas shrugged. "You were dreaming. The winds are always strange here in autumn." But that very night, he himself woke up to the same thing. A voice called from beyond the window, "To'om, come." Within a few days, the voice grew louder. Clearer. More personal. It began repeating almost every night. Sometimes it even echoed their own conversations. One night, Mary got up for a drink of water and heard, from behind the door to the porch, Thomas's voice, "Don't be afraid. Open up. It's me." But she knew he was asleep upstairs. She gathered courage, went to the window, and saw a figure. Tall. Thin. Standing with its back to her, just a meter from the house. Mary even noticed it was wearing Thomas's old checkered jacket, but its body was too long, its legs thin like branches, and its joints moved in unnatural ways. Too sharp, too jerky. Mary screamed. Thomas rushed down, but by the door, nothing. Only its stretched footprints in the mud, as if someone had walked by dragging impossibly long feet. They went to the local church. Pastor Jacob wasn't surprised. He only frowned and said, "Yes, living near a forest that is much older than us, one can hear many voices from it. But if it has begun to imitate your own voices, then it is already close." Who did the priest mean? He advised them to leave, at least for a while. But they decided to stay. It was their home, their familiar place. They changed the locks, shut the shutters. But fear had already settled inside the house. Worrying thoughts crept into their minds. They even still went into the forest now and then, for herbs, or dry wood. On the 8th day, Thomas went into the woods. He said he could hear the voice of his late father. That the old man was calling him, just as he used to in childhood. Despite Mary's pleas, Thomas went. He never came back. The police searched for 3 days. They only found tracks leading deeper into the forest, toward the old quarry, and then vanishing among fallen trees. You must never listen to the voices, never follow their call. It brings no good. Mary was left alone. And then the voice began calling her. But Mary was bound to the house, she loved it, loved her yard. At night, the house became impossible to sleep in. Voices came from all directions. Sometimes they repeated Mary's own thoughts. Sometimes they sang fragments of old songs her mother used to sing. The figure now came right up to the porch. It didn't break down the door, didn't knock, it just stood there, motionless for hours, calling. "Mary, come. Thomas is here. We're waiting." One night, she even heard footsteps inside the house. Someone seemed to be walking in the attic. Mary gripped an old hunting knife and climbed upstairs. The steps stopped. But in the corner of the attic, she found a doll, made of twigs and cloth. On its face was sewn a piece of her nightgown. Who had made this doll? She decided to leave. But when she stepped onto the porch, her car wouldn't start. Out of nowhere. Only the headlights flashed once, and went out. The car had always worked before. And then Mary heard a voice right behind her, "You won't leave. You're already part of it." She turned and saw herself. Imagine that. Standing in front of her was an exact copy of Mary. Only the eyes were empty. Black. Without whites. The face was dead. And it smiled. Mary fainted. When she was found 2 days later, she was sitting inside the house. She wasn't eating. Wasn't speaking. She only whispered, "I don't know which one of us stayed behind." She had to leave. The townsfolk were divided. Some turned away from Mary, believing her to be a liar or madwoman. Others began praying, burning incense by their homes, recalling ancient Mi'kmaq legends about forest spirits that stole people, taking the shape of loved ones. Mary moved in with her niece. The house has stood empty ever since. But locals say that at night, if you stand by the forest, you can still hear someone calling. And sometimes, 2 women identical, like twins, step onto the porch and stare into the woods. Maybe the house isn't truly empty. The forest in New Brunswick is old. Older than the towns. Older than the roads. It remembers those who lived before us. And sometimes it calls. How does it choose whom to call? And if you ever hear your own voice in the dark, don't answer. It's not you. The old-timers of Jemseg and nearby villages, like Morden or Jemseg, weren't surprised. They had heard such stories before, though people don't speak of them aloud. Many recalled what their grandfathers used to say, better not to build in those woods. That was an old Micmac trail. A place of power. Or of death, depending how you see it. And when someone asked, "Have you seen it?" The tall figure, with the face of your sister. The advice was always the same: leave. While you still can. Some even claimed they'd already heard the voices in those parts, especially in autumn, when the fog settles and the air grows heavier than usual. Most neighbors dismissed it all as superstition or the result of stress. After Thomas's disappearance, the police conducted a standard investigation. They searched the woods with dogs. Examined the house. Found nothing suspicious. They said, "There are plenty of forests here. Anything can happen." He strayed off the trail and died. "We're looking for a body, that's all." The police searched and wrote in their report that the man had left voluntarily, likely became disoriented, and perished. That was the official conclusion. Mary was sent for short-term psychological evaluation. A local paper in Hampstead published a short notice: resident missing in the forested area. Police continue the search. But one journalist wanted to dig deeper. His name was David Crawford, editor of the local district paper. He didn't believe in the supernatural. But the disappearance of Thomas Semi was too strange, and the silence of the police too heavy. Officially, the record said, a man walked into the woods and did not return. Cause unknown. The house was searched, no signs of struggle. But David uncovered something else. In the last 15 years, within a 5-kilometer radius of that house, 4 more people had gone missing. Different years, but always in autumn. Always near the forest. Not a single case solved. He started digging deeper. David managed to speak with Mary's niece, who now lived in St. John. She let him look through some belongings left after Mary's move. Among them was a small notebook, a diary Mary had kept after her husband's disappearance. The entries were chilling. "Thomas calls to me. But I know it isn't him. It knows how he spoke. It remembers his voice. But it never says things quite right. Always a little off. Sometimes I hear it arguing with itself. A whisper, like 2 identical voices. One calls, the other laughs. I don't know which one is real anymore." David realized he had to visit the house. He arrived early in the morning. The door was locked, but the niece had given him a key. The house greeted him with silence. The smell of damp, of dust, and something else, something old. Unnaturally old. As if the house hadn't stood for a century but for 1,000 years. A house that only pretends to be empty, but listens. The floorboards store footprints. The windows, glances. And sometimes, if you look at the glass at dusk, you can see someone reflected behind you, even when you are alone. On the walls, scraps of photos remained. In the basement, an old bed and an iron cross nailed to the floor. In the attic, the same twig-and-cloth doll Mary had feared. But most alarming, the back porch door was wide open. Though no one had lived there for over a year. David stepped out and saw the forest. Dark. Windless. Too quiet. He decided to stay the night. After all, it was at night that the strange things happened. He set up cameras. Took a recorder. At midnight, he heard the first sounds. Footsteps. Then his own voice. Exactly his, but just slightly wrong. "David, come outside. Don't you want to know the truth?" He switched on the recorder. But on the tape silence. Only the pounding of his heart. At 3 a.m., the cameras caught movement. In the backyard stood a figure. Very tall. Black. It turned its head toward the window where David sat frozen. He thought it was smiling. He fled at dawn. Left everything behind. On the way back, he noticed something terrifying. All photos on his phone were gone. The cameras wouldn't turn on. Only one file survived on the recorder. He played it. The voice was distorted, but clear enough. It was glad he had come. "Do you want to hear how you will die?" David didn't. He shut the recorder off. He tried to publish the story. But his editor refused. "No evidence. We won't cause panic. Just rumors, David. Only rumors." The next day, David quit. He never returned to that part of the province. Instead, he posted his story anonymously on a blog titled, "Gemseg, where the forest calls you by name." A week later, the site was deleted. He tried to restore the files, but they were gone. Even backups on his flash drive were empty. His last post read, "I'm no longer sure I remember my own voice. Sometimes, when I speak, I feel it's someone else. Too close. Too familiar." The story of the house near Gemseg remains unsolved. Officially nothing unusual. Unofficially too many coincidences. People vanish. Voices call. Figures appear at night. And the journalist who tried to reveal the truth no longer answers his mail. Locals say they don't believe in such things. But no one builds near that forest anymore. More and more people heard about the voices. Someone posted a photo of the empty house, claiming the forest whispered. Youth started coming there, curious to test it. One boy disappeared for several hours. They found him sitting on the edge of the woods, silent. He said only one thing: "It was my mother. I saw her. But she's dead. I know it was her. I'm sure." Over time, the story grew into legend. Locals stopped entering that part of the woods. Even loggers avoided it. The forest hides not only bodies, but paths. With each step, the trail beneath your feet grows softer, as if the earth remembers you, and tastes you. And if you try to turn back, you may find there is no way back. Only deeper in. Now they call it the calling forest. And they say, if you stand alone at the tree line, and you hear your name, especially in the voice of someone you know, leave at once. Don't look. Don't follow. Don't go.